We are now going to be having 12 shiurim on 12 perakim. These are the 12 perakim of the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and I think it's very important before Pesach to get to know these 12 perakim. Now, there's stories and there's medrash and there's teachings from the Gemara that has been gotten around. To know the full story from beginning to end, what the Torah says, what we can learn from the actual psukim, and what actually happened as the Torah says it, I think is very, very important, and that's the purpose of this shir. So let's dig in. This is shiur 8. This is peraches. At the end of the last perek, Moshe and Aaron are warning Paro that if he does not let Bnei Yisrael go out of Mitzrayim to serve Hashem, then there's going to be such a cover of the land of amphibians, tzvardeya, which are a mixture of amphibians and lizards, crocodiles, that he has ever seen. Apparently, Paro refused, because Hashem said to Moshe, Emer al Aaron, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff. Again, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu's staff, al hanaros, on the rivers, val arim, and on the streams, val hagmayim, and on the estuaries, vial as a Tzvardiim, and these Tzvardiim will then come up al Eretz Mitzrayim, in the whole country of Mitzrayim. V'yeit Arnes Yadai, so he stretched out his hand al Meimei Mitzrayim, over the waters of Mitzrayim. We know that in Makaz Dam, Aaron only touched the water with the staff. He didn't lift the staff over all waters of Mitzrayim. So here he actually listened and he lifted over all the waters of Mitzrayim. However, it wasn't the mata, it was his hand. Similar to what was commanded to him, but not exactly. Vatala tzvardeya, and the tzvardeya came up. Vatichas esa eretz Mitzrayim, and it covered the land of Mitzrayim. So why is tzvardeya talking about in the singular over here, as opposed to when it was plural tzvardeim? Because tzvardeim was talking about what was actually going to come up, the mixture of all the tzvardeim types of amphibians, according to the Torah, amphibians, which is a mixture of lizards and amphibians. Now that they were actually coming up, they come up in a group, it was tzvardeya is singular, it makes sense. Just like Bnei Yisrael is plural when it's talking about the Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Yisrael. However, when talking about Bnei Yisrael as a nation, that is always referred to in the Torah as a singular. So the tzvardeya, singular, in one unit, came up and it covered Eretz Mitzrayim. V'yaskein hakatumim b'altehem. So too was able to do the necromancers with their spells. V'yalu et tzvardeim al Eretz Mitzrayim. And even more tzvardeim came up on the land of Mitzrayim, on the country of Mitzrayim. V'yikra Parei LaMoshe v'Aaron, and Parei called to Moshe and Aaron v'yomer. And again, we don't know how long this was. It doesn't say how long he tolerated the tzvardeim for. V'yomer, and he said, Hatiru El Hashem, please plead with Hashem. Why don't you placate Hashem? V'yaser hatzvardiim, to turn away the tzvardiim, mimeni umiami, from me and from a nation. So now Paro is acknowledging that he actually was affected by a makkah, unlike Dam, which he turned to the palace and ignored. V'ashal chazam, I will then send out the people, v'yizbechu Hashem, to worship Hashem. What's interesting is, what would happen if, and all this time, Paro actually did allow them to go? He would say, go ahead and worship Hashem. You can take 3 days, you, your sons, your daughters, your animals, whoever you want, and go worship Hashem 3 days in the midbar. If they stay in the midbar longer than 3 days, so then that's not what they bargained for. So it's a little bit dishonest in a way. And if they stay for 3 days, then they return to Mitzrayim, what was the entire purpose? So it could be like this, and Hashem is trying to call Paro's bluff and show that even something as simple as worshiping Hashem, Paro's not going to do. So therefore, Paro at the end was forced to just let them out. However, obviously Hashem, the maker of the world, the creator of the world, the one who stirs everything, the one who knows people's minds, obviously knew what was going to be in Paro's heart. And Hashem kept saying, I'm going to harden Paro's heart. So even though Paro hardened his own heart, but eventually Hashem would harden Paro's heart, just to show that this was really just song and dance until Hashem was able to make all the Isos and the Meisim. Moshe said to Paro, Hispa'er alai. Okay, so you have done one up on me. L'mosai, from when, asir l'cha, that I should plead for you, la'avdecha l'amcha, for your courtesans and for your nation, l'hachros hasardim, to cut off the tardim, mimcha, from you, mibotecha, and from your household. Rak bayar tisha arna, only in the Nile will they remain. In other words, they will go back to where they belong, swarming in the Nile. And Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, okay, I see that you have had enough, and you asked me now to plead for you, and I will. However, Vayomer, he said, Lamachar, tomorrow. Vayomer, Kidvarecha, and he said, like your words, I will plead that these things should stop and they should return to the Nile, but it has to be tomorrow. Lamam Tedas, you will know, Ki Ein Ka Hashem Elokeinu. There's no one like Hashem, our God. How is that? Because Hashem is the one who brought it. Hashem is the one who's going to turn it around. V'saro tzvardiim, and the tzvardiim will turn mimcha u'mibotecha, from you and from your household, v'avdecha, and from your servants, u'miamecha, and from your nation, rak b'yar tisharna. Only in the Nile will they remain. Vayetze Moshe v'Aaron. So Moshe and Aaron went out, me and Parai, from Parai. They didn't ask Hashem inside the palace. Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem, and Moshe cried to Hashem. I use the word Vayitzak because Vayitzak is a cry of desperate tefillah, of when a person really wants something. So Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, Hashem, I am your servant, I'm your mouthpiece, I'm your representative before Paro, please. If he asks me to do something, please let it be my power. If I promise something, that you fulfill my wish, and you allow me to end the Makkah the way I did. This way I can make a Kiddush Hashem, and this way I can strengthen my relationship with Paro, showing that I am the Eved Hashem, and that Hashem speaks through me. So, Moshe Rabbeinu did so, al devar hatzvardim, in the matter of the tzvardim, asher sham leparo, that were there for Paro and Pharaoh's behalf. Vayas Hashem kidvar Moshe. So Hashem did like the words of Moshe, but not exactly. Vayamusu atzvardim, all the tzvardim died. They didn't return to the Nile. They didn't turn from the land and then just stay in the Nile River, like Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to Paro about. Instead, they all died, min abatim, min hachatzeros, min asados, where they were, from whether they're in the houses, whether in the courtyards, or whether in the fields. Vayitzperu oisai chamorim. There was walls and walls and piles of dead svardiim, dead crocodiles, and dead lizards, and dead frogs. Vativa sha'aretz, and the earth stank. Again, because of all the death. They stayed and they rotted. Vayar Paro ki hoisa haravacha, and Paro saw that there was relief. Vahak beid eslibai, and his heart again became heavy. V'lo sham aleim, and he did not listen to them. Kasher dibar Hashem, exactly like Hashem said he would not. So Paro was able to then stay in his palace, obviously paid people to get rid of all the dead ones and avoid the smell, even while his people suffered still with the smell and all the cleanup. But for Paro, there was relief, and therefore he refused to send out Bnei Yisrael. So why did Hashem not listen to Moshe and send the Tzvardiim back to the Nile River? And we see there's different responses, different makos. For instance, the blood flowed away from Mitzrayim. We're going to see in other makos where not a single one was left in Mitzrayim, like by Orev and like by Arba. However, here, the Tzvardiim actually, the rest of the purpose in life was to die and stink up the place. They couldn't just return. There had to be some sort of consequence. Paro completely ignored the first Makkah, and he let it flow by. The second Makkah, even though he asked it be turned back, there had to be a consequence. And Hashem said to Moshe, Emel Aaron, speak to Aaron. Don't even bother going to Paro. Don't even bother giving a warning to Paro. Don't have a conversation, just do it. The te asmatcha. He should stretch out your staff, v'hach es afar haaretz, and then he should hit the dust of the land, v'hayu lakinim, and it will be lice, b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and the entire country of Mitzrayim. V'yas kain, and so he did. V'yet Aaron stretched out as yada, his hand, b'matehu, with the mata this time. V'yach es afar, and he struck the dust, haaretz, of the earth. Vayitihi akinim, and they became lice, ba'adam behema, on man and beast, kol afar haaretz, all the dust in the land, hayakinim b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, the entire land of Mitzrayim. Talking about whether this affected Goshen, as far as the Akinim, there's no reason to think the Kenan did not also strike Goshen, but the people anyway were the people who were doing hard labor in the field, in the mud pits. They were probably used to lice. They probably were already infested with lice in a way. So it didn't bother them as much as it would bother people who were living in palaces, living in homes, trying to be clean, and all of a sudden lice not only covered them, but covered their beasts and all their animals. That probably struck them much worse. Vayaskein hachartumim, Biltehem, and the necromancers tried again with their spells to do this. Lahaitzi es sakinim, and this time it wasn't to produce the kinim. This time it was to remove the kinim. See, they were able to make more tzvardiim, but it doesn't say that they were able to remove them. Here they tried to use their magic to remove the kinim, and they could not. They could not turn the kinim back to dust. They could not get rid of the kinim with their spells and magic. Vatihi hakinim, and it was kinim. Every time they tried, it still was lice. Ba'adam behema, and man and animal. Vayemru hachartumim al paro. So the necromancer said to Paro, etzba elekimhi. This has to be the finger of God. V'yechzak le Paro, but Paro strengthened his heart. V'loisham aleim, he did not want to listen to them. You're trying to say that there's some other God that's stronger than our gods. He didn't want to hear of it. Kasher dibar Hashem, like Hashem had said. Hashem said to Moshe, Hashke ba'boiker, get up early in the morning, and you will stand before Paroi. Hine, behold, Yoitze Maima. Again, when he goes out to the water, you're going to surprise him. The Amarta Elov, and you can say to him, Ka Yamar Hashem. This is what Hashem says. Shalach Ami Vavduni. Send out my nations, let me serve me. We don't know when the Kingdom ended or if it did end, and it just seems like perhaps maybe it didn't end. There was no pasuk telling us what happened to the Kingdom, and it's very likely that the Kingdom just stayed, and it lingered, and maybe eventually it went away, but it definitely was not a one and done. While this is going on, Hashem is still warning about the next Makkah. And again, we don't know the exact time between Makos or how long they lasted. So it could have been day after day after day. It could have been a deluge, or it could have been spaced out over time. Ki im eincham mishaleach esami, because if you will not go and send out my nation, hineni, and you should behold mishaliach becha, I'm going to send to you ba'avdecha or ba'amcha or b'techa es arayv. I'm going to send to you and to your servants and your nation and all their houses and all the palaces es arayv, a mixture swarm. Umalu bate mitzrayim es arayv, and the houses will be filled with this arayv, the gam hadama es heim aleha, and also the earth that they are upon. So what does that mean? What is arayv? There's many different interpretations of what arayv is. The one that makes most sense to me is probably insects. The reason why it's most probably insects is because it just flows from everything that's been happening until now. Everything was in connection with the Nile so far. We had the Nile River, it turned to blood. We had the Tzvardiim swarms that came out of the Nile. Then we had the dust that turned into Kinim. So you mix that all, we're probably talking about dragonflies, about mosquitoes, about crane flies and flies and all these sort of biting insects and insects that fly and swarm. And again, it's saying that they're going to fill up the houses, which is completely unnatural. It's going to be something that's unnatural for them to fill up the houses. So they're not going to be just outside like usually they are, but now they're going to be a swarm, and they're going to be a swarm inside the houses. And they're also they're going to be from the land. What's from the land? Hadama, from the earth. So back then, people thought that insects spawned from the earth. Obviously, with Louis Pasteur and science, we know that that's not how it was. But they're associated with dirt and mud and standing pools of water. That's where insects really come from, and that's where they grow. And here they were moving from there across the fields into the houses to be a swarm and to be annoying to Paro and everyone else in Mitzrayim. Now, the Torah for the first time, now makes a differentiation. V'hiflesi b'yomahu, and I am going to now separate on this day as Eretz Goshen, the land of Goshen, asher ami omed aleha, that my nation stands there. Libilti hayas sham arev, that I alone has brought this swarm, leman teda, so that you should know, ki ani Hashem b'karev aretz, I am Hashem amongst the land. Hashem is saying, for the first time, I'm going to now separate Goshen from the rest of Mitzrayim. The entire Eretz Mitzrayim is going to be filled with this swarm of insects. However, not Goshen. Why? Because I'm going to show that I'm not just a desert God. I could reside inside of Mitzrayim. I could fill up Mitzrayim, and I could differentiate between Goshen and the rest of Mitzrayim. So therefore, when I said before that all other Makkahs until now happen in Goshen, makes sense. For the first time, Hashem is saying, this one is not going to take place in Goshen, and we can see the next one also did not take place in Goshen, and it's very possible that all the ones from there on out did not take place in Goshen, but the first few did, and now Hashem was making a separation. Visamti Pedus, I'm going to make my delineation, my differentiation, between my people, ubein amecha and your people. Lamachar, tomorrow, this is going to be the ice. And you will see there will be a great swarm of flying insects, but they will not be anywhere near Goshen. V'yas Hashem kain, Hashem did so, v'yavai arrive kaved, and the swarm was great and heavy. Beis Parai, in Paro's palace, Ubeis Avadav, and in all their houses, Ubechol Eretz Mitzrayim, the entire country Mitzrayim, Tishache Sa'aretz Mifnei Arev. The land was covered and was dark because of the swarm. By Yikra Parai Moshe, so Parai called to Moshe Aaron and to Aaron Vayemer, he said, Lechu, go, Zivchu Leilechechem Ba'aretz. Go ahead, serve your God, but in the land. Moshe said, this is not correct. Lasos came to do this. Because we know that it's an abomination to Mitzrayim. Nizbach Hashem Elikenu, to sacrifice to Hashem our God. Hey Nizbach Esay Avos Mitzrayim. Our sacrifices, which are rams and sheep, and we know that Egypt has a god with the head of a ram, and also they were vegetarians. Leineim v'lo yisaku. It's going to be not going to be an abomination in their eyes. It's not going to be something that's so terrible in their eyes that they're not going to stone us. They're going to see that we're sacrificing to our God, and they're going to go and stone us. Derech Shloshis Yamim, we have to go for 3 days. Ner Midbar, we will go into the desert. V'zavachnu l'Hashem Elokeinu, and there we will sacrifice to Hashem, our God, Kasher Yomer Aleinu, just like He told us. Vayemer Paroi, and Paroi said, Onoichi Ashaleach Eschem, Onoichi Hashem Elokeinu. Paroi was saying, only Onoichi Ashalach Eschem will be able to send you, Zachtam Hashem, to sacrifice to Hashem Elokeichem in the Midbar. Rak Harcheik Loi Terchenu Laches. However, don't go very, very far. Hatiru ba'adi. Stay close to our country. I want to make sure you're not going too far to go away. So he's saying you could go ahead and go sacrifice to your God. He's the one that's apparently sending you out. He's defeating me and sending you out, but you have to stay close. Vayar Moshe said, Hine, behold, Anoichi, I will go Yoitze mi'imach, I'll go out from you, Vahatziranzi el Hashem, and I will plead to Hashem, V'sar ha'orayv mi'parai, and He will turn away the swarm from Parai, mi'avadav, and from his servants, mi'amoi, from his nation, machar, tomorrow. Rak, only, Al Yosef Paroi Haseil. Paroi should not continue to deceive me, to tell me that we're going to get what we want and then retract. Stop changing your mind. Lebilti, only for me, Shalach es Ami, will send the nation. Zvayach Hashem, only for that purpose to serve Hashem. So don't go ahead and change your mind and say, once this is gone, we can no longer serve our God. Moshe left from Parai. V'yeser el Hashem, and this time pleaded to Hashem. He no longer cried out to Hashem for the kids of Hashem, that Hashem should listen to him completely. He said, okay, Hashem, this is what Parai wants. now I am in your hands, as Hashem going to do about the Arev. V'yas Hashem kidvar Moshe. So Hashem did kidvar Moshe. This time Hashem listened to Moshe. V'yaser Arev, and he actually turned away the swarm. Mi Paro, mi Avodav, mi Amoy, from his servants and from his nation. V'loy nishar echad, and not a single insect remained inside of Eretz Mitzrayim. Vayichbeid Parai es libai, and Parai again had his heart was heavy. Gam bepamazais. Also this time, v'lo shilach hasa'am, did not send out the nation. And it's very important to note this, that the swarm, which we translate as insects, was insects, and that they all left, not a single one remained. Because the next makkah we talk about, Paro is going to try to blame on the insects. However, since the insects all left, and it seems like perhaps that if it was a Arev of insects, they also left with the lice, so then there was not lice around in Eretz Mitzrayim also, there's absolutely no excuse whatsoever for the next makkah, and especially to have a separation again between Goshen and Mitzrayim, but Paro will learn his lesson. This was Perek Ches.